Alhamdulillah. So we're going to be speaking about eating. We're going to be speaking about food and drink, and we're going to be speaking about some of the etiquettes and the manners of how that's done. More specifically, we're going to be speaking, and we're going to be reflecting about conscious eating. So, why do we eat? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us in the Quran. He tells us to eat. Most of us don't need to be told. But Allah says to eat and drink of the good things, tayyibat, the good things that we've provided for you, that we've, And Allah reminds us, He's the one, الَّذِي رَزَقَنَاكُمْ, that which we've provided for you. So, food and drink is an opportunity to cultivate gratitude. It's an opportunity to put things once again in its rightful place. And the scholars even make reference that it's a sign to show one's weakness. And that's more often prominent when people are fasting. How needy we are, how dependent we are upon food. So, there are different ways to eat. There are different ways, you can eat on the run, eat whilst you're on the go, have a quick sandwich, I've only got a quick lunch break. But so much of the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ is related to, or rather contains practices within it which allow us to be more present when we're eating, to be more aware of these things. So we're going to go through some of the adab, some of the etiquettes of eating. So when you have the food ready, one of the first things that the Prophet ﷺ would do prior to eating was wash his hands, ﷺ. And this is a spiritual practice. It's a practice from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That's not just done because you've got dirt on your hands. Like, well, my hands are pretty clean. I wiped it with a wet wipe before I ate. The sunnah is to wash. And it's really important that we don't overly relativize these things. I get that's the purpose of the sunnah, so let me implement this. Let me just use a wet wipe or, sterilizing gel. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to wash one's hands with water. And he even said ﷺ and informed us of the wisdom behind this, that it's not just purely practical. It's not just a formulaic thing to do. Wash your hands because your hands are dirty and it's nice to... Of course, there's a huge wisdom in this. Nevertheless, that which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned was related to a spiritual impact. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the blessing of food is in washing before and after. So the blessing of food is in washing before. There can be inherent blessing within any kind of food that you eat. If it's made by a righteous person, if there's dhikr which is made over it, if it's done with intentions. But there's also a way of you having access into that blessing and multiplying the blessing within that food. And he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the blessing of the food is in washing one's hands before and after a meal. In certain cultures, they'll pass around like a washing, like a kettle with clean water in it, with some kind of dish in the bottom to take off the washing of the hand, the residual water. And this is a good thing. This is part of a cultural, practice which is rooted in the sunnah. It's something we should try and do, have in our homes. The Prophet ﷺ, he also informed us and told us and educated to eat with our right hands. So to kul bi yaminik, eat with your right hand. And as we know that the Prophet ﷺ would incline to things with his right hand, to give and take with your right hand, to hold a book with your right hand. Even if a person's left-handed, and there'll be those amongst, the people of Allah and the scholars that were left-handed, the way they would write. You know, it's not seen as a bad thing to be left-handed. However, there are certain things which the dictate is to use your right hand, and one of the most important of which is to eat with one's right hand. Once a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he ate with his left hand, and the Prophet ﷺ told him, he said, you should eat with your right hand, and he said, oh, I'm not able to, I can't. But it was done with a kind of, I can't be bothered. It was like there was like a spark of arrogance and pride that led him to do that. So the Prophet said, you won't be able to. And from that moment on, he was unable to literally lift his hand to his mouth. You know. So there's an etiquette, there's an adab in all of these things. We eat with our right hands. Interesting, at least in Western culture, that take the fork typically in the left hand and the knife in the right hand. So when you eat, you know, they set the table all wrong. You need to swap it over and get used to this. And this is not something which is like, it's not that big a deal. This is an important thing. It's really important to do, to eat with one's right hand and to get used to it. This is, you know, it may be cumbersome, it may not be, it may be like eating all over again, but this is an important thing, and there's a reward in that, in doing those things, because it's following the Prophet ﷺ. So to say Bismillah as well over our food, and that's the first invocation. If we can't remember any other invocation, you know, any other dua that we say Bismillah, you know, that we eat in the name of Allah. And so many of these things, the prophetic practices, it's just to orientate oneself. Why are you doing this? You're doing it in the name of Allah, you're doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can say, there are different adhkar. The one that we're going to mention now is Allahumma barik lana fima razaqtana wa razaqna khayra minhu. Oh Allah, bless for us in that which you've provided and grant us that which is greater than it. Except if a person is drinking milk. We say, Allahumma barik lana fima razaqtana wa zidna minhu. Just merely increase us in it because of the inherent goodness within milk. And to the desert Arabs, milk was considered a meal in and of its own. It's powerful. It's also important to eat and mimma yalik, that which is closest to you on the plate. And that's irrespective if you're eating on your own or whether you're eating communally in a larger plate. So to eat that which is close to you and not to stretch over to the other side of the plate and not to take from the middle of the plate, because that's as Imam al-Haddad mentions when conveying something of these etiquettes, he said this is the place where blessing descends. It descends from the middle, and in taking from the middle it disturbs that flow of barakah. There are spiritual things happening when you eat. You know, so in reaching out to the middle, it kind of disrupts that flow of barakah. So to eat that which is close to you, that's the way to access the barakah of the food. Tamam. And then they say to take a moderate size each time, not to stuff your face, you know, not to kind of like pack it into your mouth. Take a moderate size, you know, luqma, just a small amount. And whilst this may not be an easy thing to do, it's even recommended that if you can chew the food properly and swallow it before you even reach for the second bite. It seems like such a simple thing. It's such a really difficult thing to do. You know, because normally you've half chewed it and it's like this, you know, never-ending flow of, you know, food intake, astaghfirullah, you know. And some people, their spiritual practice would be that every mouthful they would say Bismillah, and afterwards they swallow and say Alhamdulillah, and then say Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah. So to eat a moderate size. Make sure it's chewed properly, you know. if a person, the Sheykh would say as well, when you chew the food properly, you're able to experience it more as well, rather than just, you know, feeding that kind of urge, that appetite. It's actually kind of, it promotes that it's slower, you know, there's less haste, but what typically in every practice that does that, it makes a person more appreciative of each bite. And as we know that the hadith which says that the person should only eat the son of Adam, the human being, it's best, the default is to eat that which just keeps you back straight, basically just to keep you going, not to eat in any form of excess, and not even to be satiated. It's not, when you feel satiated, they say it's not a good thing. And they said, and if you must, and it's not like, oh yeah, the sunnah is 1/3, no, that's, the wording of that is like, and if you must, then 1/3 for food, for your stomach, 1/3 for drink, and 1/3 for air. And it's been mentioned that if a person can just, if they feel that they've, you know, they're full but they're not stuffed, completely satiated, if they could just leave one mouthful, leave one mouthful, which is on the plate. It's a spiritual practice to help move away from that detachment to food. Now, the obvious question there is like, well, where are you going to put it? You're going to throw it in the bin? You're going to get rid of it? Obviously, if it's something that is can be wasted, will go to waste, and that's not something that we should do. But if there's other people there, you offer it to them. If it's, you know, at home. If there's not, then if you put it away and save it, depends on what it may be. You know, some food is not going to be able to be re-eaten, but as a general practice and as a default, we should be mindful of this. Even if what it means is when you're preparing the food, you know, you have a certain amount. Before you've cooked it, you take that last piece out, or that last slice, or that last, you know, spoonful of whatever it may be, and you leave that out just for the sake of Allah, meaning this is my nafs. No, I'm going to give this up for the sake of Allah. And they say just that one practice of one little bit has a huge, one form of abstinence, just every meal. It helps in detaching the nafs and the appetite for that kind of, you know, being often like, you know, like consumed by food, subhanAllah. Now, we said to eat with the right hand, and that can mean even when using a spoon or a fork. And there are certain foods which you're only going to use, you're not going to eat soup with your hands, unless you use it with bread to dab in the sauce. However, irrespective of that, it's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that he would eat with his hands. It's not haram to use a utensil, that's a fork or a spoon or chopsticks or whatever it may be. It's not haram. However, it's the sunnah. Now, if people aren't used to doing that, then that's fine. The main thing is the focus is that we use the right hand. At the same time, with all of these habits, we should try and inculcate these things into our lives. It shouldn't be just something that's put on the back burner. That's something I can't really be bothered to do. Not necessarily something that I can't do. Or, you know, it's just easier for me to use my, well, maybe that's part of the wisdom in the sunnah, that there is you do need to wash before and after, and it gets you into that mode of appreciation and gratitude. Now, also with the nature of the type of food as well, the scholars say that it's good not to always get exactly what you want. Like every meal is exactly what my appetite has been looking for. And sometimes to eat very simply. Now, if we're not able to do that all the time, they give a recommendation that if you could just do that one time during the week, you know, and if you do it together as a family, you know, you have like a sunnah day for the food. So something like eating barley bread and dates, something very, very simple, just for an evening meal or something very, you know, it's not too much hardship for people, but it's that subtle reminder, And similarly with eating with one's hands, if you're not used to eating with your hands, then train. You know, if it's not every meal, then one meal. If it's not every day, then one day. And just to get used to these kind of things. Introduce these things into our lives because it's the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's also recommended to lick one's fingers after food. And it's interesting that in certain cultures that's considered rude. Don't lick your fingers. You know, and one of the reasons for that, it's a form of showing gratitude for the blessing. So if you've got sauce all over your hands, just to wash it away is almost saying, I don't need that. You know, but it's no, I'm gonna treasure and honor every single thing that was given to me. You know. And the scholars also say to do it gracefully. You know, you're not like, you know, in front of everyone. To do it gracefully. You know, to take, you know, from one's fingers. They also say it's recommended if you have like a bowl to make sure it's absolutely clean, squeaky clean, like as if it's just been through the dishwasher. You know, if you can do that. And some of them would even take some water. Some of them would even take some water and place it into the bowl, swill it round, and then drink the water. And this was the practice of many of the kind of older generation in most Muslim lands, you know, and some people still do that today. Yeah. But it's such a common thing now, unfortunately, there's so much waste. You know, Allah says in the Quran, Allah does not love people who waste. La yuhib, it's a really intense you know, narrative. Allah doesn't love those people who waste. So the person, particularly the believer, the Muslim, a person that's on a spiritual path, they place an importance in these spiritual practices, that every part of the process of eating from beginning to end, they're cautious that we're not wasting things. It also helps with washing up afterwards. If you've got a plate full of, you know, day-old dry food and this kind of thing, you don't have to worry. It's, mashallah, it's already squeaky clean. Just wash it maybe with some water or something. Yeah. Traditionally, they'd also use wooden bowls a lot of the time. You use wooden bowls or out of stone. Yeah.
Yeah. You go through the sin of licking your fingers.
Yeah.
It's not like licking, like you said, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so like, how do you lick your fingers after the food? There are different ways, but one is more like this, you know. Yeah. Wallahu a'lam. And then to wash one's hands after the food. And it's important also to use something that gets rid of kind of any kind of residual colour or smell on the hands, particularly before going to bed, they say. So to wash one's hands, tradition they'd use like a natural soap, like an exfoliant. They have something in Tarim called etiquette, which is like a coarse kind of shrub that's been ground, and it allows it's like an exfoliant. This is an important thing to do, especially to remove any of that which comes off, you know. And often after food, they would use some kind of oud or etir just to perfume one's hands in order to get rid of the smell, the remnant smell after food. Alhamdulillah. So that's from beginning to end. You start by washing and you end by washing, and you make the du'a. And there are many du'as. In fact, there are more narrations of du'as which come after the food than there are before. And some of the people of insight, they said that, you know, it's part of the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, that he knew that, you know, when people are ready to eat, that, okay, we can manage one dua. If it was 6 du'as to make before we were going to eat, it would have been difficult. The mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, there's one dua that's narrated before we eat, and then there's around 6 afterwards. You know, but the one, if we could say, Allah, Alhamdulillah, that's the main thing. Alhamdulillah, to show appreciation and gratitude. الذي أطعمنا وسقانا وجعلنا مسلمين وجعلنا من المسلمين. Alhamdulillah, it's always appreciation. Start with intention and end with appreciation and gratitude. Why are you doing this? You're doing it in the name of Allah, it's from Allah, and we're trying to cultivate that thing that it's for Allah. And you end with appreciation and gratitude. It's really important because, you know, we live in a time where most kings of the past would not have eaten in the way that we do in a single day. So the Prophet ﷺ would eat meat around once every 40 days, and that was on average, you know. And this is not exactly healthy for us, you know. But if we are, you know, even the most simplest of foods in most of our lives are actually very luxurious, and so if we're able to, you know, at very least give thanks, you know, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to understand that it's what it's for. One of the important things also just before food, and just to be reflective and mindful. What are the intentions for eating? You know, what's my intention for eating? One of them is to be mindful that this is a means to get, by which I'm given energy and the capacity. What am I going to use that energy for? To disobey Allah? To do something bad, to get the energy for the wrong reasons, or to turn to Allah and re-engage with Allah. So they say always just to make the intention, you know, I'm eating, inshallah, to be in a state of dhikr, to be in a state of iqbal, you know. And even if you could say, well, I don't really mean it, I'm just hungry. But just conditioning the mind, conditioning the soul is a really important thing. Just tell yourself, you know, it's really important to do this. Now, there are other kind of etiquettes and adab which kind of surround food. One of the most important things is the Prophet ﷺ never once complained about food. Never. Yeah. And not just about the type of food, but also even in terms of like, it's never like this is too salty or this isn't sweet enough. Never once even hinted at a complaint. You know, Imam al-Haddad says, even if it's not very pleasant, like sometimes someone might be given something or they prepare something, it just didn't work out according to the recipe, but to never complain. And to cultivate through this process, being content, being in a state of rawda, qana'ah, just to be content with what one has. If it comes, alhamdulillah. If it doesn't come, alhamdulillah. With both quantity and variety. Oh, it's the same thing. We've had this, you know, we had this last night. SubhanAllah. Most people in the world, traditionally, and potentially even today, you know, especially not in other parts of the world, they would have the same thing, around the same thing. The copious amounts of variety, which, you know, because it's interesting when people in traditional societies, you know, things that haven't really been changed that much by modernity, like in Hadramaut, is when they get asking, they're inquisitive about where you're from, and you know, particularly if you're from a Western land, they'll ask questions about, I don't know, the weather or something, and then they'll say like, what do you eat? And it's a funny question because what they mean by that is, oh, we have our staples thing that we eat every day, and every family has this kind of thing because this is what we use. But how do, as Westerners, do we really answer that? One day it's pizza, next day it's a hamburger, then it's chili con carne, then it's Chinese, then it's Thai, then it's, you know, kebab, then it's, you know, roast dinner, then it's, you know, Swedish meatballs, and it's like it's, you know, all around the world, and they don't understand that. No, but like, so when they see things like, you know, Western people, they eat beef burgers, they think that's our staple thing every day, you know. It's just funny, you know. But the joke's on us because it's not We're the weird ones. We're the ones that's not how people would traditionally have eaten in Sweden or in the UK or in general parts or the world. You know, just to have this like menu of whatever you want. And you go to the supermarkets now, subhanAllah. And that's one tip: just never go shopping for food when you're hungry. Like, just be careful. Ramadan's on the way. Don't spend your day in the supermarket because everything's going to look like, because the nafs is like just completely gravitating towards those things now. Try and go shopping when you've eaten, you're satiated, and you can just get what's right. It's a really, yeah, it's one of the worst things one can do. So in terms of just being grateful, alhamdulillah. And also, if you recognize it, you know, I'm not that impressed with this. Recognize, yeah, but that's not a good place to be, because like, there are many people right now that maybe have no food, you know. They just have like 1 meal a day. This whole 3 meal a day thing, even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't have this. They had a meal in the morning and a meal in the evening. They didn't have, you know, 3 staple meals a day and then snacking in between. You know, this idea of binging on food. You know, it's fueling the appetites. And not just the appetite for food, but other appetites. Some of the scholars, they said, like the center of kind of problem with the ego is it's kind of sourced within the stomach. You know, because if a person, that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, if a person isn't able to get married and fulfill that, then they should fast. You know, because it kind of severs those channels. But if a person just eats and eats and eats, then everything, one speaks more, there's more that kind of desire, there's more, it's easier to get angry. That's why people are so chilled typically in Ramadan. There might be that initial pinch, you know, where like the glucose levels like plummeting and you're just feeling like groggy, but you don't have the energy to get angry, you know. But if you're like topped up, you've got all the energy, I'm gonna, you know, and we're complaining, you know. I wonder how many people would be commenting on social media about anything and everything, you know, if they just didn't, because you just feel, you know, it's a way of like detoxing from trivia, just minimizing a bit more what we eat, you know, living a bit more simply. I think it's just simply put. It's really important as Muslims that we learn to live simply, you know. And because even then it's all relative. I mean, we're living like kings, and we should, you know. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Next time you go to the supermarket, do you need that extra type of sauce? Really? You know, do you need all those flavors of crisps? Do you need, you know, how much meat do we need to eat during the week? You know, and really focus. If we're talking about quality, it's not like, well, this is a really well cooked steak. Our quality as Muslims, how do we read quality? Halal and tayyiba. If it's halal and it's pure, you know. So rather cut down and put one's money into, you know, eating food, especially, I mean, there's a real shubha, real grey area with a lot of meat in the West. We need to be really careful that we're double checking, you know, where is this from? To some extent, a lot of people just decide to eat just fish, you know, out of scrupulousness and wara, just out to be cautious, because you are what you eat. There's an absolute principle within our deen. You are what you eat, you know. And if a person feels like an agitation in their heart, they're just becoming like agitated, and they don't know why. That's one of the things you should go back to, is there's something that I ate that may have something that's a bit dubious within it. And it may not necessarily be haram, you know, explicitly haram. It may very well be. But we should really look into these kind of things, you know, to be cautious about what you eat. So really important, particularly people on a spiritual path, to be mindful of the source of their food. Because if you eat something and it's dubious, it's got some kind of, you know, doubtful thing within it, you're going to do things which you're going to fall into sin, whether you want to or not. It's a really serious thing. You're almost, it fuels this kind of, it flows through your veins, it flows through your body. So, similarly, if you have food which is pure and good, and also in the preparation. When we prepare our food, it should be with the dhikr of Allah. It's not just like quick, get it, so I can, stuff it down my throat. Like that's just, haste is from the shaitan. Haste is from the shaitan. Fast food. It's not, a'udhu billah. We need to prepare it, and it needs to be prepared not just in terms of the multitude of spices and seasoning and the way it should be, fricasseed on the, just, the preparation is, why am I making this? What are my intentions behind this? Am I in dhikr when doing this? What's the source? This will change someone's state, really. And if people are cooking food for other people as well, as if they're a guest, they should be mindful of these things. You don't want to feed your guests that which is haram, or that which is just completely void of dhikr. Someone's like putting on the radio or just listening to something that has no meaning. That hal is going to seep into the food. So we should be people of intentionality. Make many intentions. Some of the greatest forms of da'wah is through food. Really. Just feeding people with blessed food has such an impactful effect upon the heart. And to be in dhikr. So, Bismillah, when you're putting something in the food. Bismillah, when you're pouring the water. Bismillah, you put it on the stove. Bismillah, you're adding the seasoning. Bismillah, all the time. Bismillah, Bismillah, Bismillah. And also it's encouraged, to do salawat. As a general dhikr to create that barakah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. You've just done something which is seemingly functional and mundane. I just wanted to get to the point where I eat it. If someone else could make it for me, it would be easier. But now it's actually an act of worship. It's transforming adah to ibadah. Something which is merely habitual, something that you do, to something which is now a form of approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you could make your breakfast in the morning, and it's an act of devotion by transforming it through dhikr and through intention. Now it's really important also that the money that you use when eating, to buy the food rather, is halal. So if we're purchasing food, we need to make sure that how did that money come to us? Obviously, if it was stolen, or if it was through bribery, or it was through some kind of gambling, or it was through some kind of usury, all of these things are going to have an effect, and that's what you're feeding yourself with. And one of the things that the scholars say is that's one of the biggest ways for a person's children to really, lose their clasp on the deen. It's just something as simple as people have not thought about what's halal, and they're feeding their kids with I care for my kid, but you're feeding them poison. By giving them the best food, but the source is something which is haram. You weren't aware of what you were doing. So just to be aware, and really to buy your, the most halal money that you have, to put that into your food, and that will affect your spiritual state as well. As much as we can, we should be eating in company, whether it's with our families or with our friends. It's mentioned that many of the Salaf, many of the Sahaba would never eat alone. And it's said that the person that eats in company, and when you eat with your, as a guest, and you have people that you host, that you're not taken into account. There's no accountability for it. So it's the best of both worlds, literally and metaphorically, inshallah. And the more hands, the merrier. The sunnah, is the more hands in the plate, the more barakah is in the food. In In Yemen, they have a beautiful kind of ease about these kind of things. And they're really just, yeah, just come around, and they'll put it out and everyone just starts. It doesn't have to be these kind of like, you know, excessively ceremonial occasions for inviting people around to the house. Like, and then it becomes too heavy. This is what we've got, you know. What suffices me will, you know, suffice too. It's all good. And it's, you know, it's important to get used to serving food, how khidmah is done in food. You know, it's not just the actual eating; it's the whole process of how it's served. And normally they'll start, if you're in a gathering or a majlis, that the eldest person out of deference will start. If it's the host, then it's sunnah for the host to start, because it makes people feel that sometimes people might be shy, like, when do I begin? So the host starts, in order to allow the people to, you know, to partake of the food. You know. This is really important, especially for people with families. You know, that if it's, you know, you're there, you know, as husband and wife, that they eat together. If you have children, that they eat together. You don't just do things separately, like TV dinners, you know. The dad's somewhere, the mum's somewhere, the kid's somewhere, and they're all eating separate times. Because it's like breaking up the opportunity for barakah. When people come together, you know, this is almost like a normal thing in Hadramaut, yeah, and many parts of the Muslim world. Like they find it strange that people eat on their own in one household. Why would you? That's just a strange thing to do. You know, it's seen inherently as, when you partake of food, it's done collectively. You know, it's because it's done as a spiritual practice. Culturally now, like, it's just part of their way, because it's rooted. It's a faith-based culture. You know, and it works. They're like, no, but this is our time to speak to each other, and this is our time to see how we're doing. And there's, you know, along with getting used to training ourselves to eat with our hands if we're not used to it, another thing is also sitting on the floor. We shouldn't be kind of like, oh, that's just something that maybe they do in other countries, and Muslims here, we just eat on tables. The sunnah changes in that way? Absolutely not. If we have tables, and it's permissible to eat on a table, it's not haram, but it's the sunnah to eat on the floor. And if we're able to, you know, as and when, once again, if we're not able to do it all for every meal, you know, just one day out of the week, you know, just to get something of that barakah and that light, you know. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, I'm a slave of Allah, and I eat as a slave eats, you know. And the sunnah is to sit on one's left leg, with one's right leg raised, except if you're in the presence of an elder or somebody of the ulama, a scholar or someone that's revered. Then it's actually preferable to sit on one's knees of reverence. Yeah. You can also sit cross-legged if it's easier as well. Now, typically, one of the many merits of or benefits of eating on the floor is, what happens is you lean over, so the stomach is like crunched down, you know, as opposed to leaving out and letting the belt go, and, you know, you're leaning back, you know. So to lean forward, and actually makes a person feel satiated much sooner. It's one of the many benefits. You're also looking at people, leaning into people, which activates a real conversation, especially if you're sat in a circle, because you're engaging with people. Sometimes tables are strange, especially if you're used to sitting on like you sit with someone at the other end of the table. You can't really have a normal conversation then. It's a strange thing. No. There's just something very, very light and loose and natural about eating on the floor as well, eating with one's hands, especially as a family. We should try to really introduce this into our lives. And this is why something so, you know, we all eat, you know. It's just something that we have to do. But you can transform it to a mere habit into an approach to Allah, and an opportunity to root meaning into one's life. This is what the Sunnah does. That's That's what the Prophet came to teach us. That everything that you can do can be, it's not a movement away from Allah. Let me eat and then go back to the mosque. No, like whatever you do, it's an opportunity to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, in summary, food should be a source of gratitude and appreciation. It should also be an opportunity to check our intention and to practice the art of intention. Why am I eating? What am I doing? What am I eating for? Who am I eating for? To what ends? To what means? And also to know that you're engaging in a thing which is very dangerous territory, because it's so close and so dear to the appetites, the carnal appetites of the nafs and the ego. So if we're able to slowly detach from those kind of things, it has a huge effect on one's spiritual practice in general. And they say if you're able to take care of your tongue, meaning to control your speech and to control your stomach. They also say the private parts, and the Prophet ﷺ said, the one that say, the main thing is that we're able to control that which is in our stomach, what goes in. It's narrated by Sayyidina Ali, the one that has too much concern about that which goes into his stomach, his worth isn't much more than that which comes out of it. Which is a pretty harsh thing to say. But what he means by that, radiallahu anhu, is that this is not the way of the believer to constantly be obsessing about these kind of things. If Allah provides it for you and it's there, to be appreciative and to be grateful, but to know this is something, it's a means for appreciation, and then we move on to that which is more important. We don't want to be like the cattle, like Allah says in the Quran, they're just like livestock, grazing and binging, and belhum adal, they're more astray, because the cow is just being a cow, sheep's being a sheep, and we need to be human. And the way to do that is to follow al-insan al-kamil, the most perfect of human beings, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that taught us these practices. And when we drink, you drink obviously with the right hand, and you drink 3 sips. We don't gulp down, gulp, 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 gulp. 3 sips, and to breathe in between. Alhamdulillah. Not to breathe into the glass. And to eat and to drink sitting down. These things are really overlooked. But it's something that we should almost feel a pain, when we're standing up. We look for a place to sit down, even if it's just crouching down on the floor. In Tareem, if a person drinks standing up, people almost look with like what? How could you do that? Like, astaghfirullah. It's such a strange thing to see, because the whole society is on that thing. That when you drink, it's just a natural way of being, to sit down and appreciate the drink, appreciate the food, not just to gobble it down and go, just to appreciate those tastes. So alhamdulillah, we pray this has been of benefit. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Any questions?
I think so.
Any questions of me? MashaAllah. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Somebody asked for dua, but has no question.
The dua, we're going to send them out, inshallah. So.
Just know, like,
The du'as, inshallah, will be sent out, inshallah.
just for like, dua for Muslims.
Is there anything else? No. Okay. MashaAllah, jazakum khair. There are a few people, obviously it depends on the nature of the moon, and it may be different in terms of the sighting of different places. Some people did the 15th of Sha'ban last night. Some people were doing it tonight. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala place barakah in all of these moments, particularly in preparation for Ramadan, and allow the branches of Sha'ban to grow and reach, and allow us to enter into Ramadan in the best of ways, inshallah. We pray that Allah blesses us in Sha'ban, وَيُبَلِّغْنَا Ramadan, and allows us all to reach Ramadan. Just a general reminder as well, there are many, many changes which are taking place around the globe. And there are many, there's a lot of speculation and a lot of, inference of why and when and how and what will be. And it's very important, the way of the people of Sened, the way of the great masters of this tradition, is they always had the goal in mind. And being too consumed by the events around us can be really detrimental to the human soul. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, the likes of my family is like the likes of similitude of Noah's Ark, Safinat Nuh. Man rakibaha najah. Those that mount on board, they're saved. وَمَنْ تَخَلَّفْ عَنْهَا غَرَقْ. And those that actively decide to leave the ship behind, they don't go on board, they're drowned. Some of the scholars, they say it's similar with the waves of fitna, with the waves of tribulation of the dunya. And that's just the nature of the dunya. If it's not one thing, it's the other. This time it's this, next time it's something else. But Allah's looking for thabat, istiqamah. And the way of the people of Allah, whilst they'd be aware of how these tides and currents and waves would affect people, and then it requires an element of addressing in order to balance things, that the asl, the default, is to do exactly what you've always done. So in these sessions, inshallah, the hope is that we become, we give life and revive the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in ourselves and in those around us. This is the best thing that we can be doing. Don't think that by virtue of practicing these great sunnahs that it won't be a means to spiritually lift and alleviate all of these tribulations on oneself and people around them. It's funny that people are very quick to cite certain ahadith which often appease the ego, but there are many, many ahadith about how to deal with all of these kind of things. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to be people of balance. Ummatan wasata. Allah describes us as in the Quran, the wasat, the ummah of the middle way, but it doesn't mean middle like the average ummah, the mediocre ummah. The medium is in the center, the most balanced, and for that reason the best of ummah. But our greatness as a people, as Muslims, is in direct accordance to our movement to the way of the Prophet ﷺ. The closer we are to him ﷺ, the greater we become in the sight of Allah, the more effective we become, the calmer we become, the more we become conduits for peace and light and guidance. So may Allah allow us in these sessions to always be mindful of our intentions. It's not just another way to eat. This is the way of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ that said, the one that revives a sunnah, one sunnah of mine, any sunnah, فَقَدْ أَحْيَانِي, it's revived me. He also said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the one that revives a sunnah of mine, he has indeed loved me, and the one that loves me is with me in Jannah. So just think, just by something subtle now, in the change in the way that you eat. And there are many people which will be fasting today. So as Maghrib draws in, and when to implement these adab, to put barakah into your approach to how you break the fast. Seal the fast in a beautiful way. It's not just about, I fasted, now let the nafs run wild. The real secret is in that point. How does your nafs now take back that intake of food? Is it just a rush and a complete form of ghafla? Or is it an opportunity to say, Ya Allah, even though I'm hungry, even though I'm thirsty, even though I'm tired, right now, Allahu Akbar. You're greater. You're greater than the way I feel and the way, like, it's about you. So let me remember the way of your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So may Allah give us all tawfiq, inshallah. Hayakum